Good morning. Ready to roll? Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank Marty again for having me speak at these conferences. I always enjoy it tremendously. Interesting things happen at Marty's conferences. Last year, Marty, you recall, you had Tim Draper, I think it was, here. And Tim is a pretty well-known venture capitalist, and also he's a big owner of Bitcoin. And at the conference, I thought it was really interesting. I went up to Tim and started talking. He handed me a business card. The business card had a little teeny chip in it, which entitled you to a teeny fragment of Bitcoin. And I had that business card, and I took it and I stashed it away, and I went home and put it in my business cards. I've been scrambling around my house looking for that business card with Bitcoin at 100, going to 1 million, so they say. I mean, I could buy a whole new house. So, thank you, Marty, for enriching me. Hopefully I find it and drive my wife crazy. I know it's somewhere. I speak on this topic called a new dawn of real estate. And I say that with some reservation because it's a pretty ambitious title. People are expecting major things out of me today. And so I've always played with, should I be so ambitious and say this? And you know what? I keep reverting back to the same thing. I have to say this because it's true. We are in a new era. And I can sit there and say real estate looks like it could be good. Who knows what's going to happen with real estate? But I'd be doing it a disservice because of the changes that are ahead of us. So today I'm going to touch on this. While I may not be able to deliver Bitcoin to the audience, I hope they'll deliver some value in another way. So, Marty, you can go. Before we start moving into what I want to talk about today, I want to go briefly through Wharton and my past here to give you some sense of the perspective that I come from. So Wharton's a firm I started in '87, so more than 35 years ago. And we have been sponsors of real estate transactions over those 35 plus years. We've touched every asset class, and within those asset classes, we've done everything from renovations to ground up to buying existing properties and stabilizing them. And we've been through a number of cycles. So the gentleman Sal's talking about a number of cycles and gray hair, although I have less than I used to. I qualify at least on those two accounts. The firm has been fortunate to have significant base of high net worth investors as well as institutional investors. And some of these guys are pretty well known names, among others. And so we have a pretty good basis of understanding real estate over the last almost 40 years. Marty, next page. So this is the timeline of the firm. And one of the things, when I started the business after leaving Wall Street, I didn't sit down and write a business plan and say, you know what, I'm going to go and try to figure a business that's going to always be continuously looking for things ahead of everyone else. It wasn't really well thought out. I mean, I can tell you otherwise, it sounds like I'm a genius, but it wasn't that way. But now that I look back on my career, it seems like the pattern has occurred where I have actually been successful in kind of being a little bit ahead of everyone else. We're never the first, but we kind of see trends. Some of these trends are just secular changes. Some of these are maybe, they could be dislocations that are occurring. And then some of them are really major trends, which we'll talk about, unstoppable trends. But we were really early in the pioneering of the self-storage business as far as institutionalizing it. One of the big issues at that time with self-storage, for example, is very small assets. And there was an interest in institutions, but we were one of the first guys to actually aggregate a bunch. We own most of the stores in the Hamptons, for example, which we sold to a REIT. And then we own a lot of the warehouses around New York City, which we sold to another insurance company. And we were early in 2006 looking at the credit markets, and we put together an opportunity fund for what we thought would be some kind of disruption. No one could predict what was going to happen, but we were there with some capital to take advantage of buying opportunities in the real estate business at that time. And then in 2011, we started buying multifamily in the Southeast, value add stuff, when no one was really thinking about that, buying things at 7 caps, financing with 3, coming out with 13, 14, 15% of our money. I got backed by a big hedge fund called Opposite at that time. They saw what I saw, and we were fortunate. Our timing was good. We acquired about 7,000 units during a run of 5 years, which we wound up selling. We moved into industrial in 2017. Along the way, by the way, we invested in South Florida when everyone else was really depressed about it, with 20,000 vacant condos in the market. We saw a different thing here, which is a city that was about to explode. We wound up buying a bunch of land from some banks, and we were fortunate. We built a bunch of buildings down here as well. Still bullish on South Florida. And so where we are today which is what I'm going to talk about, brings us to Fort Industrial and another venture I just started called Fort Industrial. Marty, onward. This is a pretty ominous looking slide, but it's supposed to talk about the craziness that's ahead of us. So let's keep going. So before we dive deep into what I'm seeing here, and the businesses that I really like today, I'm going to just give a very high overview of some random thoughts. It's almost like speed dating on this slide, only because I'm asked this often, and so I'm just going to share some insights. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just generally speaking, some of the observations I see today, we're going to be moving more and more into a world of big data, which is going to continue to shape decision making, particularly, obviously, across all investments in our lives, but in real estate in particular. And what's going to happen here is I think we're going to find over time that anything that's obvious, and I talk about this, as far as an investment, is going to be driven to a meeting. So over time, there's so much information that's available, and the ability to discern that information is going to make decision making a lot more homogenous for all investors. And so you're going to see real estate, the obvious asset class, obvious transactions become priced to perfection, making it harder for entrepreneurs to make money. So if you think back many years ago, early on, right? I'll give you a very simple example. Someone's buying a house. Let's say buying a house for investment. I know next door the guy just won a certiorari where he got his taxes reduced. I know that when I buy this house, I can pay $50,000 less in taxes. I can then rent the house, make more money. That opaqueness is gone. Today, it's already priced into the deal because it's in the data room, right? Brokers know it, everyone knows it. So that little teeny arbitrage that you used to go to make is gone. And so you magnify that now in more complex transactions as information becomes more and more available. Everyone has it, everyone's running the same models, and eventually AI is running these models. So it really kind of, for me, it started to kind of paint a picture as to why I'm thinking about the things I'm thinking about today. Because the world we're going to move into in real estate, in my opinion, is going to be a separation of the really big guys getting bigger, and they're going to be asset under management guys, and then there's going to be small, nimble guys who are buying stuff that will still exist. But the vast majority in the middle, I think it's going to get harder and harder to make money. I don't really want to go through a lot of the rest of these things. One point I do make, though, and something people are still in denial about, is that we're in the zero interest rate environment is over. It's done. And what's happening is we're moving through this shift now of the mentality of the investors that were kind of, they were benefiting from this for the last 10 years. I mean, the last 10 years in real estate was financial engineering. Let's call it what it was. You can sound like you were a genius. Maybe you did some cool things, we think we did. But a lot of people got bailed out because of interest rates and declining cap rates. That game is done. So now we're going to be in an era of 3.5% to 4.5% interest rates. We're going to be teetering between what's called negative leverage and positive leverage. And so we're going to be back into the real estate game. But what this means, in my opinion, is that returns are going to drop, leverage is going to drop. It has to. And so we're moving from this shift. And here's the other problem we have. Private equity firms that raised money in 2020, 21 promised their LPs 14, 15% of their money, right? Now, don't forget, they're intermediaries, generally speaking, they're intermediaries to guys like us. So there's what's called a double promotion being paid, which whacks off about 400 basis points, right? So what's going to happen is you're going to start seeing two things. Number one, guys are going to go, money's going to go right to the sponsor, get rid of the guy in the middle, which is the middle market private equity firms. Or the private equity firm is going to say, I don't need the sponsors' money, man. I can do it myself. Because there's not going to be enough room for two. And that's, again, due to what I think is going to be this generational shift that we're seeing with interest rates. So this is an interesting backdrop. Not necessarily the essence of my talk today, but information that's going to be interesting to discuss. Okay, Mark, let's go on. The only word I care about today is not plastics, it's data. That's it. This whole discussion today is about that word. We are in a new time. Data is just beginning to affect our lives. I mean, it's been with us for a while, but now, obviously, with the it seems like the world existed before ChatGPT and after ChatGPT. All right, we're in that after ChatGPT world, and we're now in the paradigm. So data is into electricity. It's flowing through. It's going to be AI systems, which are going to use algorithms to learn, make predictions, perform complex transactions and tasks. So this is a seismic change. We are at the first yard line with 99 yards to go. All right, next slide. What's really fascinating, and this is the stuff that gets me crazy when I think about it, the amount of data that we're generating is enormous. Over the chart on the right is showing the data that's being generated. Just think about grandparents taking videos of their kids. I mean, like they're probably the biggest consumers of data in the world right now. But the amount of data that over the last 5 years, well, we're predicting to 2025, the amount of data will triple. Now, so here we are going to be in a world with data that is voluminous, and now we're going to have a mechanism to be able to make sense of this data. Data in this particular chart is measured in something called zettabytes. So a byte is 1 unit of information. A zettabyte is 1 unit of information with 21 zeros after it. Now, to give you a sense of what that means, if you took a stack of dollar bills and stacked them up to the sun and back, 1 zettabyte is that round trip 700,000 times. That's 1 zettabyte. All right, now we got 180 of them. This is going to look minuscule in the years ahead. And you know what's so interesting? I'm going a little off script here, but we really couldn't be at this point if we didn't have the things that preceded it, namely the internet. The internet became a vehicle to dump information into. Now we have this humongous body of work, all this data. And finally now, we're starting to make sense of what this data means, right? So the other thing that's happening here, which is going to be really remarkable, is somewhere in the near future, I'm not sure exactly when, within 10 years, I would say, based upon what's happening with science right now, quantum computing is going to enter our lives. But now we're going to have a mechanism to not only evaluate the information, but do it at speeds that we don't even understand. Today, they're predicting that quantum computers will be 158 million times faster than the fastest supercomputer today. These numbers are enormous. All right, so we're moving into this world where data is going to play front and center in our lives. We're going to have more of it, and we're going to be able to do more with it. And this gets into, obviously, we talk about AI, but we're also talking about robotics, humanoids, right? We're talking about how this is going to affect infrastructure, social media. Our whole lives are going to be in an upheaval, and real estate is affected by this. Marty, next. So with this backdrop, I want to talk a bit about what Warren's focused on today, given our career and my path. And so, Marty, you can go into the next page. So, as I think about where I am in my career, I really feel I'm in a unique period of time. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. And so we're dedicating our business now to what I call about investing in real estate that will define the future. And the 2 places that we're keenly focused on logistics and digital infrastructure. And when we think about logistics, for example, obviously everyone knows what's going on with e-commerce, but e-commerce is early. It's so ridiculous. I mean, they were talking about Black Friday, all the reporters are saying, oh my God, there's a record this year. I mean, come on, who doesn't think it's not going to be a record every year for the rest of our lives? I mean, it's like, don't eat that to get it. All right, why don't you go to a store to buy a pair of socks? I mean, you'll have them there tomorrow. So we're really early still in e-commerce. Obviously, automation is going to play a big role in logistics. All the stuff that's going on with onshoring, nearshoring, all these things are factors which I'll talk about. And then clearly what's happening with what's going on with infrastructure, with data centers, et cetera, is a whole other thing that we're really focused on. And we formed a new platform called Wharton Digital to take advantage of that. Okay,
What kind of opportunities are you looking for in those 2 spaces?
which space?
Either the logistics or the digital.
Let me go through the rest of this, and you'll hear it. If you don't get the answer,
All right.
we'll talk. Okay. So anyway, so we're, as I mentioned before, we wound up selling, our portfolio of residential, probably too early in 2017, but we were pretty pleased with the terms. And I really wanted to focus exclusively at that time on industrial, which we did. So in 2017, we formed Morton Industrial. Over the last 7 years or so, we have been involved with about $1 billion of transactions, 9 million feet. These are properties that we developed, we own, we have under control, going through approvals on, and we've had some significant partners with us along the way. Right. Next page, transformation industrial real estate. Okay, so industrial real estate, as I mentioned before, was going through a transformation. E-commerce obviously is a huge driving force, still early. We're going to be moving, and what's happening now also fueling this, as you know, is the CHIPS Act and the money that's going into, from the government, which is feeding new types of industrial. And so, we have all these forces coming into play. Mark, the next slide. This is a way too complicated slide. I don't expect you to remember. I'll ask you questions afterwards, and I'm memorizing this page. But the key point here is there are so many forces at play in industrial. Data centers we'll get into, which is a whole other beast. But when you really take a step back and think about the different sectors in real estate today, residential, hospitality. Yeah, technology is going to play a role there, sure, but never nothing like this. You think about what's going on here with what's going to happen with warehouses and power and so driverless trucks and all these things are kind of converging on industrial. As I mentioned before, obviously e-commerce. What I like, and this gets back to what I said before, when we're moving to a world where data is going to homogenize and commoditize real assets, in my opinion, it's going to be the places that are in a kind of like an upheaval, that where there's opaqueness, where there's craziness, but huge tailwinds where the money's being made, and that's where we want to play. Right? This is a slide that just points to some of the different types of real estate that's going to be affected by. On the left is this I call the shift to digital, but these are factors that are affecting the industrial business. And on the right are the types of buildings that are coming out of it. So these are going to be new types of buildings, smaller ceiling heights, more power, geared toward automation. It's interesting. I'll take a quick aside. We built big warehouses. We have built a number of them. A 1 million square foot building we built down in Atlanta. Because for anyone who doesn't understand 1 million feet, that's 23 football fields under one roof, to give you the size example. But what guys are doing today, which I find ironic, is they're building these warehouses and they're putting in volleyball courts, steam rooms, because they're charging by labor. They want to attract labor today. What's ironic about this is in 5 years, it's all going to be robots, mostly robots. I don't think they play volleyball as far as I know. Some do. They probably play better than we will. So we're going to be moving to this world, which is, guys are still focused on today, but they're not thinking about really what's going to happen in the future. I'm not saying we should disregard the workers. And the other irony here, this is something that people don't think about, but it's interesting, like unions are starting to still try to kind of make their way to warehouses. And what they're doing is ironically shooting themselves in the foot, because the more they push for higher wages, et cetera, the more companies are going into the arms of robotics and automation. So in the perverse way, they're actually they're working themselves out of the job. More next page. Again, very briefly here, the markets that we like a lot are the Austins, the Phoenixes. Those are great tech markets, driven by the investment the government's making in chips and data centers. And what happens is when you have these kind of markets, an ecosystem develops around them, where companies that service these businesses, like TSMC building a huge chip plant in Phoenix, the myriad of suppliers and consultants all need to be in facilities. And logistics is an industrial where these guys are going. So we love markets like that. We love the East Coast, densely populated markets for last mile distribution is going to continue to be a factor. People are going to want to get goods faster and faster. So buildings that are close to populations are going to be sought after. And then we like the growth markets in the Southeast. And particularly still like South Florida a lot. South Florida is an interesting type for something called cold storage too, which is a subset of industrial. Okay, Marty?
I know you're not looking at Los Angeles or California.
I just don't want to be battling, what goes on out there. I mean, you can't disregard it, and I can't do everything. But, it's only going to get worse, I think. So there's plenty to do elsewhere in the United States.
Yeah, we did a deal in the family office in California. I haven't been in California in 4 years. We're getting the California franchise to send us and our investors taxi. And it's in Vegas, so I mean, and you gotta pay those too, so California is prohibitive.
Yeah, so this is an interesting case study of a deal that we did not that long ago in South Philly. We bought a subway repair facility, which was dormant. The company that had the contract with SEPTA, which was the transit authority in Philadelphia, lost the contract. And this building was where the trains came off the line. We go through the building, so there were railroad tracks going through this building. There were pits where guys would work on the subways from below. And so this building was abandoned. It was a real mess. Terrible roof. The floors were all uneven. Obviously the rails were in there, and we got this deal. We went down and talked with a broker in Philadelphia, and he was saying, I had this deal, you're probably not gonna like it. Most of the guys had passed on it. He wasn't a very good broker. And I took our guys, ran out to the building, I looked at it, I walked around there. Within 10 minutes, I said, we're buying the building. And the reason I said that is the building sat and sits at the intersection of I-76, I-95. It's 10 minutes from the airport, 5 minutes from the port, and most importantly, within 45 minutes, 6 million people. And I knew at that time we could buy this building cheap, and then it was the last mile facility. And this wasn't the word last mile actually meant something. Today everything's last mile, but this is actually at that time. If you take a look at the picture in the lower left-hand corner, that's Center City in the background. And the building on the right was what this building looked like. Well, we were fortunate with our instincts. We wound up putting a bunch of money into this building. I convinced a firm out of Chicago called Wall Street to back us. And we held the building for 2 years. Unfortunately, through our renovation process, Amazon came along and took the whole building. And we were projecting rents of about $7 a foot, and they paid us $11.75. So I had a pretty happy partner. The other thing that we're doing quickly, I'll just let you know already, we just bought a call center. And this call center is interesting because it's basically 70% vacant. So you have this huge floor with all these desks and no one's sitting. And the reason they're not sitting is the company's now moving to large language model, and so they don't need people. They're using AI to talk. And so they're long on real estate. And this happened to be in our backyard in Cherry Hill, a market I like a lot. So we wound up buying it and converting it into a warehouse. Okay, Marty? So the big initiative for the firm, which I started early this year, is called Wharton Digital. We're going to go on from there, Marty. Wharton Digital really, when I think about Wharton Digital, it's really kind of a culmination of my career. I think real estate, and I talk about this a bunch, but there's going to be a convergence of real estate, private equity, venture that's going to start merging together. In a simplistic way, Related on that with buying Equinox and buying SoulCycle, for example, and integrating them into his condo developments. I mean, that's a very simple way of looking at it. But more and more, we're going to see this lack of real estate kind of being its own little silo. And so we're developing a business here. We're going to have a brain trust of knowledge that can be applied across these different types of strategy. The key here for us is we're going to start with the Trojan horse, which is real estate. And for us, that's going to be buying land and taking it through the process. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But this is really what we think about. And there's something, the DNA of the firm is an investor in technology. We did make a big investment, 10 years now, in a company called Dataminer, which is a $4 billion market, at least the last round was $4 billion. And it's a company which analyzes in real time, all types of real-time information, tweets and others, and makes sense of that to create actionable results. So if an oil field blows up in Nigeria, it's selling information to traders who are going to move oil, for example. The US government's 50% of the revenues today, particularly the Department of Defense. And so all the soldiers in the field, for example, have this app on their mobile devices, you know, if there's any type of, things going on in the field, et cetera. Marty? Yes. So obviously the backbone of what's happening with data is data centers. You're reading about it every day. There's not one day where it's not on the front page of the papers. And rightfully so. The amount of infrastructure that's required to accommodate what's happening with AI. You know, what they're talking about now is over the next 5 years, $1 trillion of investments in data centers. Amazon today, I mean, they say it every day, but they're putting at least $100 billion. These are big numbers. I mean, we're getting immune to the side of these numbers, but they are massive numbers. And the implications of this spent over 5 years, this is not decades. What this means for our society, the creation of wealth, the opportunities is hard for us to fathom. So AI obviously uses consumer power, and ChatGPT query uses 10 times more power than a simple Google search, just to give you an idea, all right? And every day, more and more people are utilizing ChatGPT. ChatGPT really is pretty simplistic compared to where we're headed. We're early in the build out of this network, this data network. Today, you're reading about these hyperscale campuses where they're, you know, 1 gigawatt power, but it's not there. And so we look at these huge campuses as being kind of the main highways across the United States. But what hasn't been built is the off ramps, the side streets, all that stuff's coming. As we have this feeding network for assimilating and processing data.
I saw you, if you go back to the slide where you had the database AI, and if you go back a few slides, there was one thing I didn't see. I see real estate, venture capital, credit, private equity, and the hub being data centers and AI. Within that hub, or you just mentioned it, concerning the energy considerations and also the placement within high connectivity cross fiber network. So is that part of
Yes.
the big blue bubble? And
Of
what
course.
are you doing for to make sure that the energy component is covered within that pool?
Yeah, no, that's an integral part of this, which I'll touch on in a second, but you're right. So, Marty, you go to the next page, PowerPoint.
Okay, to answer your question, have you heard about New Albany, Ohio?
No. Yeah, they have no power. There's no power there. It's a huge play. I mean, what's so fascinating, all these markets that you never knew have grown now as places that for lots of reasons companies want to go. And unfortunately, the utility companies, which are these regulated beasts, just were completely taken by surprise at what's happening here. So New Albany is an example of a place where they just don't have any power right now. But it's a massive market.
And why was that picked out of all the locations?
There's reasons why. If you think about it, it's in the center of the country. There's fiber that comes in there. There's certain areas like Northern Virginia, Silicon Valley. These didn't happen by happenstance. A lot of it has to do with the connectivity that comes through those points, which is a crucial thing for something called latency and other factors. One of the things also that I want to point to, and I know it's obvious, but the amount of demand is outpacing supply by enormous amounts. So they're projecting 20 to 30% demand increase every year in the next 5 years. You know, for power. So these are compounded numbers. These are massive numbers. Okay, Mark. So generally speaking, our initial strategy is going to be through land, called power land, which is acquiring or optioning off land that we can go and get municipal approvals for and then secure the power. And then ultimately either sell or joint venture or build ourselves, depending upon whether we get a tenant or not. This is a hard game, really hard game. A lot of places today are out of power. A lot of utility companies don't know what to do. They're, you know, so this is a game where you need to be nimble, smart, and let's remember that you're playing against the biggest of the biggest. I mean, so guys like Amazon can pay $4 million an acre, and it doesn't even, it's like a grain of sand, right? And they'll drop the $4 million if they have to, they don't care. It's very hard to play in that game. So what we're thinking about is where do we play where the big boys aren't playing? And we're gonna talk about that in a bit more. So we love the land maybe because you get a lot of leverage off your money, so if we tie a piece of property, we take it through approvals, it costs us, let's say, $500,000 to $700,000 to get it approved. We work on with utility companies, sometimes you have to pay for power studies, sometimes you don't. So let's assume you're in for $1 million, you buy a piece of land, this is very simplistic, doesn't always work like this, but you pay $100,000 an acre. This kind of land today, powered land, goes for $500,000 to $1 million an acre. So if you think about the leverage you get on $1 million, potential $1 million investment, you do the math, you know, these pretty large multiples. What our real game plan though is to actually try to do deals where we attract tenants, because that's where the real money is. When you start building these facilities, is where we're talking about really large numbers. A typical data center today that's fully built out is almost $1,000 a foot. So if you're talking about a 50 megawatt facility that's 500 million, you know, you read that today, gigawatts or a billion. This is real money. And so the interesting problem we have right now in the industry also is capital is trying to understand all this. There's a lot of guys who want to get into the big capital guys, they don't know how to do it. So we have this jockeying for position and invest needs for capital. That's causing disruption. Again, these are things I like to see. And let's remember, behind this is just this big force that's unstoppable of what's happening with data. So it's these sets of circumstances that kind of really get me excited. I don't think I've seen this, I know I haven't seen this in my lifetime, without a doubt. So what we're thinking about right now, first of all, you really want to try to get power within 36 months. That's the key right now. You want to be able to deliver power. And companies will pay up for this. It doesn't even matter almost where your land is, as long as you can deliver power, and obviously the more you can deliver, the better. We're also looking at alternatives. We talked about it a little bit before. So behind the meter, which is a phenomenon where power is generated privately on site, and so not using the utility company, maybe hooking into the utility company later on. But there are massive deals that are going on right now. We're evaluating an opportunity in southern Utah, which is 1.3 gigawatts, where a major operator is committed to taking all the power and we're going to build a natural powered gas plant there. The other thing that we're seeing is opportunities of upgrading existing facilities. Most of these facilities are obsolete because of the chips that are being produced today, and the amount of power that's being consumed, and the heat that's being generated, and all the other factors that go into this. A lot of old facilities are getting renovated and upgraded. There's going to be limits to what they can deliver, and it's going to depend upon, it's a very technical game, but there's lots of opportunities there. We love secondary markets. We think they're still early. Markets in universities are a big consumer of data. Internet of Things in your major cities, so you think about driverless cars, right? You're going to want to have data centers that are right next to where the populations are, because you can't afford 1 nanosecond of any time in between getting the information into the computer and back out to the vehicle. So there's going to be this world that's going to start evolving where you're going to have pods of data centers, these big ones and then these sister ones, and the sister ones are not yet being built out. By the way, it's still early. You know, and we talk about data centers today. It used to be that they were cloud data centers would basically store data and run processes. But now we're moving into data centers that are going to learn about data, and then they're going to infer and exercise thinking. And this process of moving from kind of taking data, making sense of it, and then actually having it learn to think and act, there's none of this been built yet, or they're just being built now. We're going to look back in 10 years and say, like, this is basic stuff, but it's just starting. Yeah.
With the data centers and the population centers, how close are you to the actual population center in terms of location or distance?
Depends upon where you are.
Are you economics working to get closer to the city, or are you still?
I'll give you an example of the deal we're doing right in a second. We love to be right on top of the city, but cost of real estate is crazy. Municipal approvals are crazy. Neighbors are crazy. It's getting worse and worse. I mean, you know, like, they're noisy. You know, batteries are running. They're better than industrial, right? There's no trucks running in out of it, but they're not really most beautiful buildings, although we like to design that stuff. Let's go to the next page. So this is a live deal actually that we have right now on the contract in Cincinnati. It's really a prototype what we think would be really interesting, opportunity more and more. So we're seeing kind of Rust Belt, stranded power. So think about all these municipalities that during the, 60s and 70s lost major companies. Could be equipment manufacturer, could be paper manufacturers, and they had power to power their plants. These guys have left, and now they're low power. So we found a site north of Cincinnati, it's a half an hour north of Cincinnati, that is a municipality that owns the land. They own they own the power company. They're long power. 60% of the power in this instance is hydroelectric, which is really good today because people are looking more and more for clean power. And most importantly, they want this. They want to move from the world that they were in, which is this kind of heavy manufacturing world, to this digital world. And it's very interesting. The mayor who is leading the charge here, we didn't even know this, but he did his State of the Union address. My guys were there, and the first slide was our data center. So what we're working on with these guys is actually buying more land, building on campus. And he wants to kind of lead the charge of being a new mayor in this new world. You're going to see cities like Youngstown, like some of these broken cities, Detroit, there are areas up in Michigan that had huge power plants. They are going to be starting to have new life. And because they have the power, and they have municipalities that actually embrace it, because otherwise they're destined to continue to fail. All right, so we're going through this change, and I continue to talk about this. The permutation of change is a societal change too. And so we're going to see parts of the world, parts of the United States that before were forgotten, flown over, that are now becoming revitalized. It's really, really fascinating, and it's actually kind of fun to be part of that. And help lead the charge. The one thing I want to point out with this facility in Cincinnati, we're using a engineering firm out of the UK, which designs data centers globally. And the reason we chose this firm is because they're really on top of what NVIDIA is doing with chips, let's say 3 to 5 years out. You have to be thinking, one of the big issues and potential dangers in data centers is obsolescence. The speed of change here is so massive that you can build a facility and when you're done with it, it's obsolete. Your ceiling height is not high enough. So we're building a building that, we're designing a building, we got approvals for a 70-foot high, 2-story building. It's 35 feet on each floor. The need for height is important because your racks are going up higher and higher, more power is coming out of these racks where the chips are being put into, and then above it you have cooling systems, you have a distribution of power, so height is really important. That's why a lot of the older buildings don't work. They're 12, 13 feet. They can't accommodate what's required. So we're thinking ahead on designing a state-of-the-art building in of all places, Hamilton, Ohio. But we have our hands on a number of more of these kind of sites. So I think we're going to be part of that page. Not that I don't really go around selling, but we are going to be running. We're going to put some money together this spring for this vehicle. Where we're going to be putting together the power plants, and we're making sure some of the assets that we have right now into that vehicle. So just wanted to mention that while I had you. And that's good.
Why don't we ask for questions right now?
Any questions out there in the audience? I think I have a couple myself, so. So here's a great question. You're talking about energy needs, and is all that you do, is it domestic, or do you do anything in Europe, or?
Domestic, but we are looking next.
I mean, just from your great intellectual ability, the guy that gave our speech on economics outlook said that he anticipates interest rates going down very low in Europe, because they're gonna be in a recession. Do you think it will make European land more attractive? And also do you see Europe going on this trajectory?
Oh, Europe is on its way already. I think what's going to be interesting is Africa and other parts. No one is going to be immune to this. Nowhere on this planet. So the places to go are the places that people are not even thinking about. There are huge hurdles, obviously, in, let's say, a place like Africa with power, but they will be overcome. So Europe is already happening. The problem in Europe is you still got a bunch of NIMBY stuff, it's hard to get approvals, but it's there. But I don't really think about interest rates. This is the only asset class where I don't really give a shit about interest rates. Because this force is so great. Sorry, your language, I'm sorry.
So getting back to your slide there about real estate strategies, land optioning, all this land is already zoned for energy? I mean, I know
So
when you buy-
generally speaking, I mean, the art of the game is finding land that you can build data center on. So most of them are zoned industrial already, industrial is general zoning. But municipalities are trying to figure this out themselves. They may not actually even have this type of zoning. We have to help them write the zoning. You know, again, it's something which is changing quickly. As this has happened within years. This is like, you know, again, we're gonna look back in 10 years, 15 years, and think we always have this, but we are at the inflection point as we speak this second, it's changing right now.
Have you done any kind of a study in terms of, I mean, you're saying that power is really the main factor in determining success or not on the short term, right? What's the cost of just rewiring when power is available versus having to bring in new power generation? Have you done any kind of?
Well, it's obviously vastly cheaper to try to work off the existing grid. The problem today, by the way, a lot of it's what's called generation, which is really obviously production of power. But the bigger problem is transmission. Think about the power lines. That's how it goes from power plant to your facility, right? Those, they're not set up for this. So there are places, and getting those built are hard. You need easements, you need the time to get equipment. So we got this whole mess of a lag between kind of everyone's aspirations to try to build these things, and maybe you have power available, but you can't get it. So when you think about building data centers, you need to look at all these things. You need to think about all the considerations. And by the way, fiber, which we talked about before, which is actually how it gets transmitted from place to place, is hugely important. And without it, you can't do anything. So there are places in the country which look fantastic because there's no fiber. So then you got to bring it in. It's 250,000 a mile. You know, somebody's have to come, you know, massive miles to get there. This is why it's a big boys game.
Yeah, I mean, we know tech is impatient in terms of waiting for stuff, right? You know, it's really interesting. It's a lot of people are as I know, pushing this location in Ohio, not Cincinnati.
Mhm.
But what I find interesting about this is that people are talking about like bringing mini nukes, small reactors, but there was like a big nuclear plant was brought on board in Georgia recently. I think it was 5 years late, something like 3 or 4 times over budget. So, I mean, those factors come into play as well, correct? I mean, you're dealing with bureaucracy.
You want to hear something ironic? Here's what's ironic, is that the big problem, the culprit today is AI, all right? What's ironic is that AI is going to be using AI to figure out how to make plants more efficient and how to build them faster, right? So we're what we talk about historically that took 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever, doesn't mean anything anymore. Because we're now in another era where things are going to be understood faster and more intelligently. So again, it is an ironic situation, right? Where AI is going to figure out how to solve AI.
There's geometric progression of knowledge, right? Sure. And you're pointing out that as well.
I have a few questions about that.
Another question?
Yeah, actually, so you mentioned AI, so I assume it's gonna be a high density facility, like 300 to 500, what's it called, watts per square foot.
Kilowatts.
What is your, on your secured power easements or supply, what are you looking at as a cost on your power purchase agreements? What are you paying for that on a kilowatt per hour basis?
Well, that's an important factor. You know, one of the other things you think about, there's a lot of things you have to think about. What's the cost of power? Right? Things are measured in kilowatt. Right? So generally speaking today, you want to try to be 5 cents, 6 cents an hour. Some places are 10, 11, 12. New Jersey is very expensive. It's one of the problems with New Jersey. But you'll see guys who pay up because they want to be next to New York City. But as you start going further south, it's just too expensive to stay to try to solve that problem. And so there are places around the country where the cost of power is a big factor.
And for, you mentioned a 350,000 foot facility, so you're probably looking at what, 250,000 watts-ish?
I'm not sure the question.
So, I mean, in tapping into the power grids themselves, let me take a step back. How big is the lag time for contracts with the city, with the state? How much does permitting eat up in the rollout of your data center models?
Depends. I mean, you know, in places that want, you can get bills in 6 months, right? What drives the problem is the power, it continues to come back to power. Municipals are always a pain in the neck, you gotta figure that out. And I have my dear friend Neeson here, who's an expert, by the way. Neeson, thank you so much for having us today. Neeson's one of the senior partners of Averman. He's the lawyer that I use often, and just a terrific person, so I wanted to make sure to give a shout out to Neeson. But the municipal approvals are not the big issue. Again, it's the power companies, and they're bureaucratic monsters. That's what the whole problem is with these guys, and they don't know what they're doing. They never had this before. You know, they sat around the country club and, you know, that's what they did for their whole life. Got paid $300,000 a year, right? Like, so teaching them what to do is, this is the deal in Cincinnati that we're actually gonna write the agreements with them, because they don't know what they are. It's really interesting, yeah.
Yeah, so just a couple of things in what you said, so I just want to get a clarification on robotics. I thought you said something like in 5 years. I thought you meant robots would go into buildings or something like that, so maybe that's what you're saying or something, but I just want to clarify that. And then the other thing is much more important, and just, you know, you're talking about up to like 100 megawatts. And then I'm just, how does all this fit in? Like, you know, what is Equinox going to do? What are the other digital REITs going to do to play in the space? How does it fit in with what Constellation is going to do with nuclear power and all that? You know, and if things, so even if they don't want to hear about it today, like in what you're saying, where they're using AI to make things cheaper, to figure things out. In a few years, would they want to play in the space where the big boys aren't playing right now? Because it'll be cheaper for them to play in because they'll think more figured out what the cost is.
Who's they?
So, I mean, players like either the big REITs who play in the space
Yeah.
or utilities themselves. You know, I just, and maybe there's others besides Constellation that are much more entrepreneurial. You know, so I just want to get your opinions on this.
Mhm. Well, not really sure of the question, but one of the things I think you're gonna see potentially more, for example, we're looking at deal in Charleston. Dominion is the power, they just joined ventures with Google and got equity in their data center. So you're gonna see more of these kind of cooperation going on, and Google's gonna upgrade their power for them, which is gonna service the population, right? So, it's happening, right? It's the only way the big guys can really do this now. There's a lot of political pressure too, you know, here they are, the bad guys coming to town, taking all this power, what are they giving back to society? So, yeah, there's gonna be a lot of this going on, but it's just so unbelievable, think about dollars we're talking about here. Like, again, I keep going back, you throw this around like it's nothing. You know, these are massive investments, and who has this money? It's the Googles, it's the Amazon, that's why, when you think about it, I'm not getting stock advice here, but you have to own these stocks. You have to. They have impenetrable, and the government may break them up or not break them up, they're not breaking them up to the point where it's gonna matter. Like, you know, there are forces that can't be beat.
You've got one last question.
Hamilton, Ohio deal. What's the timeline of execution? Is the whole thing done, executed, finished?
So our hope is that we could break grounds, sometimes on our mission. Now, one of the things you think about, it's an important question, is one thing to break ground. The other problem you have today is equipment, some crucial equipment that goes with what's called substations, which are step down in power from power lines down to your facility. The vital equipment there can take 2 to 3 years. So you don't want to be building a building and then sitting there waiting with interest ticking away, right? And the tenant who wants to move in and not have it. So timing all that's interesting. And this is another thing that becomes a factor today, is that you almost have to be buying this equipment in advance of knowing whether you have a tenant. Right? So this is, again, it's marvelously complex, huge amounts of money. And the way we view it at the end of the day is this is going to be a game of portfolio theory, where we're going to make a bunch of bets on a lot of different pieces of land. We're going to throw dollars at some of them, some we're going to lose, some we're going to win. But the wins are so big. It's almost like a venture model, but I would say a little more sophisticated, maybe better odds. You know, you hit on an important.
I think the speed people are gonna move at is gonna be something that people aren't used to.
Yeah.
So, but it's great, there's gonna be some big winners.
The greatest wealth will be created in this space in our lifetime. The first trillionaire, in my opinion, you remember Peter said it here, is gonna be created from this space. Now, maybe Musk will get there first, who knows, but, and it's happening, we don't even realize it yet, but it's happening.
I said the last question, but I'm gonna give
I'm
it to you
gonna
because
go
I
back,
like
I always back. Of all those city, states you have mentioned, right,
Mhm.
so, which is the best?
We go back to the states and mention, hold on a second.
Okay, South Carolina.
South Carolina, North Carolina, New Jersey, Texas, Ohio, Utah, Arizona.
Where are you seeing the best?
I think Arizona is the most interesting place.
Take short.
But it's really hard to find land there, but they will continue, Phoenix is kind of the epicenter of that market. I think the District Garden States is interesting, everyone knows for Resi, you go to Carolinas, right, or Lifestyle, right? Those places are lag behind the data centers, so I think those are interesting markets too. Populations, people wanting to live in certain places are also gonna drive data centers, because they want employees there, I like those markets as well. The markets you want to stay away from, at least for now, is Northern Virginia, for example, because that's where every single data center company is. It's ridiculous. You can't get in there. How am I gonna battle Amazon? Right? They're not going to Hamilton, Ohio,
Right.
although I hope they buy from them.
Fantastic. Well, listen, Peter, great job.
Thank you.